someone says, I can't cook. I never even went to culinary school, but I've worked in some of the best restaurants in America. How'd that happen? And not to sound like a broken record or the guy from Ratatouille, but anyone can cook. So I'm going to distill down some of the core essentials to what I know about cooking, and by the end of this video, mark my words, you will be able to cook, so long as you follow the guidelines I'm about to give you. Starting off with the basics of measuring. This is incredibly important because it's the first place most people go wrong. How do you measure ingredients to be correct across the board? Really, there's only two ways you can do that. Number one, you can go by volumetric measurement. That would be measuring cups, measuring spoons, but the other way is purely by weight. Grams, ounces, kilos. Normally people are going by weight though, they're probably going by grams. Scale is ideal for any form of accuracy, and you will 100% need one if you want accurate baking. Now for the more volumetric approach with cups and spoons, what matters is how you scoop. Everybody does it a little different, but I use the scoop and level method. Here's how you do it. You scoop it up, cup or spoon, and then using the back of the knife, scrape the top and level it. Different recipes require different things, but if you have both, you'll always be prepared to measure anything. Next, let's talk about setup, otherwise known as mise en place. Translation, somewhere along the lines of everything in its place. Whatever recipe you follow, you need to identify and organize equipment and ingredients. That means pre-measure and separate everything on a tray, then execute the recipe. Is this an absolute necessity? No, but it increases the chances of having successful execution of a recipe substantially. Although it adds more things to clean, it does make cleaning up a little bit more organized. All right, at this point we're ready to get cooking, but Josh, what kind of pans do you like to cook in? I'm glad you asked. There's a large variety of pans that you can use when you're cooking, but my ideal choice is stainless steel, which is why I'm happy to talk to you about today's sponsor, Maiden's Stainless Steel Collection. Despite the fact that they're a sponsor, I've actually been using their equipment for years, before I was even a partner of theirs. Of course, you can spend $2 on a beat up pan that you find at a garage sale, but good quality stainless steel like this here will last you years, maybe even a lifetime if you take good care of it. And they're extremely versatile for all types of cooking. Maiden's Stainless line has fantastic heat retention thanks to their 5-ply stainless steel for even heating. Not to mention their stainless is used in thousands of restaurants worldwide, including multi-Michelin star kitchens. So you can be confident that they're gonna last for you if they're lasting for those guys. So be sure to check out their cookware in the link in the description to save on your order. Now, moving on. Next up, knives. We're gonna talk about what knives you need and how to properly use a knife. Let's start with your must-have knives. Step one, absolutely no knife sets ever, period. They're typically way too expensive and you're usually only gonna use like maybe one, maybe two out of the 5, 6, 7 knives you get. Not a great bang for your buck in my honest opinion. But if you have budget for 3 knives, here are the 3 top knives I would pick. 1 8 to 10 inch chef knife, 1 serrated knife for slicing bread, 1 petty knife, not a paring knife. It's basically a multi-purpose knife. You can use this for cutting small things, peeling things, but if you can only have one singular knife and you really want to invest in a good one, make it the chef knife. The first place people go wrong is how they hold the knife. I've said this many times and I'm excited to tell you again. A lot of people do this, right? You're holding the knife. You got no control over this thing. This thing could go anywhere. I don't know what the... Very simple process, all right? Here's the spine of the knife. Thumb on one side and index finger on the other. You're now pinching it. What do I do with these 3 fingers? They're just gonna go around the handle like that. Here's the thing, you're probably gonna be like, oh, this feels awkward. Move your hand around, make it feel comfortable, move the knife around until it falls into place. It's like, oh, that feels pretty natural. Now you have control over the knife. At that stage, you have something to do with the other hand. Form a claw with your hand, like you're gonna scratch somebody with the middle finger out as far as possible. Second thing you're gonna do is turn your elbow out like this. The side of your knife goes against that knuckle and you're just gonna stay on that knuckle whenever you're cutting anything. As you go, you can pick up speed, you can try different techniques, but there are many knife cuts that you really need to know to get started. Let's talk about a chop. A chop is more of a loose term, and the goal is to get it sort of square-ish. A rough chop focuses a little bit less on uniformity and more just getting it into bite-sized pieces best you can. Typically this would be used maybe in a soup and you're in a rush, or it's something that's gonna get blended so it doesn't matter what it looks like. A fine chop would just be slightly smaller than that. And finally, a mince. This is when you just keep on chopping it up until it's borderline a paste. Many uses for that. That moves me on to the next bit, which is sort of like a more clinical version, which would be a dice. You'll take an onion that's been cut in half through the root, with the root still attached, cut towards the root, starting on one end and separating each cut about a ½ inch each. Optionally, about halfway through the onion, you can cut across towards the root. That just helps separate the segments of the onion a little bit more evenly. And then now cut against the grain at equal ½ inch distances to get equally sized diced onion. Of course, there's medium and large dices, but but there's also a small dice, and if you go even smaller than a small dice, that's a brunoise. Then there's the baton. To make it simple, you'll start off by taking a large thick vegetable, cut it into planks. In the case of a baton, it's about a ½ inch thick, and then you're gonna cut ½ inch thick segments lengthwise across that plank like so. You have batons. You want a batonette? Make those cuts closer together and equal to the thickness of your plank. So if the plank has now gone from a ½ inch to a ¼ inch, then your cuts should be a ¼ inch apart to get batonettes. The thinner you go, the closer you get to a julienne, which looks like this. It all starts with a base cut and gets smaller or larger from there. Now, a chiffonade you might not see used as often, but it is a great technique when it comes to getting really fine, nice threads of herbs. The easiest way to do a chiffonade is to take large herbs. In this case, we have large leaves of basil, stack them on top of each other, roll them up nice and tight like a cigar, as Gordon Ramsay would say, and slice along the entire length of that quote-unquote cigar as thinly as possible, and you end up with these nice fine little threads. There are more specific types of knife cuts, but everything after that is typically just a different size. But if you know those basic ones, you'll mostly be covered for the general recipes that are out there. Go slow, do it over and 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 over, and you'll get better. Number 4, ingredients. Two things matter when picking ingredients: freshness and quality. When you're about to commit a bunch of time and energy towards this, how can you expect a strong outcome with a weak starting point? Here's how you find fresh and quality ingredients. Number 1, Google is your friend. Every ingredient is different and exhibits qualities of freshness in many, many ways, and we're not gonna be able to explain them all here, so be sure to Google it first before you buy it. That said, here are some general cues to look for. For meats and seafood, generally speaking, you don't want a stinky odor. If you go over there and it smells like formaldehyde or ammonia or like a fart, using your nose is always a good place to start for freshness. Second, visual and physical cues. Take any vegetable, especially one with lots of layers like an onion or cabbage. It should be tightly wound, not loose or falling apart. The color should be bright, and it shouldn't have any marring, bruising, and obviously no visible mold. Typically, the more colorful an ingredient, the fresher it is. Now, that's not always true, but if it is dull in color or graying or even sweating, that might indicate a lack of freshness. For fruit, you're looking for just under peak ripeness. Every fruit shows ripeness differently. Once you learn the cues, pick just under that when you purchase, because it will ripen on your counter. For example, a ripe mango looks like this. It should be a bit soft to the touch, should give a bit when you press it. If you pop it on the top, it smells fresh of mango, and it should not be rock hard. You're only gonna learn through repetition. That is how you get great in really anything, honestly, but especially the kitchen. But once you have a foundation of understanding freshness of ingredients, you can focus on the unsung heroes of every kitchen. A stocked pantry. Pantry essentials. Pantry essentials may sound mundane, and they kind of are, but they're also important to having a properly stocked pantry. The benefit of it is you always have what you need all the time, no matter what. It's the difference between an average meal and a great one, because you have that special ingredient that you love to use. Pantry essentials are based off of what you would be frequently using. They're essentials. They're things you need to have nearby you at all times, no matter what, no fail. That means you would kind of determine that. But here are some general things that probably everybody should have. Kosher salt, some sort of a flaky salt like Maldon. Vegetable oil for high heat cooking or emulsifying like making mayos. Olive oil, either for cooking, making pastas, dressings, black pepper, butter, and one of the more unique ones is chili oil. I feel like everybody has this nowadays, but to me, I have to have it always. But think about it like this. You bake a lot, sugar and flour plus any seasonings you like should probably always be on hand. Basically, this means stuff you use enough of so that it's always 8 arms length away. So for each person, it'll be a little different. But if you start with this, you have a good base point for just about anything you want to cook. Next up, how to season and balance flavor. To me, this is hands down the most important. There's 2 pieces. When people think seasoning, they're thinking seasonings like spices, garlic powder, paprika, celery powder, so on and so forth. Those come into play, but the number 1 most essential piece to seasoning is salt. I've said it a million times. It is single-handedly the most influential thing you will use in your kitchen, period, end of story. I don't want to hear anything about it. The simple reality is there are many flavors around the entire globe that are incredible, but none of it would really be that great without the addition of salt. It enhances flavor. Why would you not want to use that? The biggest mistake that most people and even restaurants make is not putting enough salt. Yes, putting too much is possible, but I think people get such a scared hand that they end up under seasoning. Don't be scared. Add salt to the absolute maximum. Don't go to the point where it's too salty, but just before that. The idea that you should only season high quality ingredients lightly with salt or else it will just taste like salt is literally an urban legend. The simple reality is that salt has a threshold. It is guaranteed to enhance the flavor of your food the more you add it until you reach that limit. And that changes depending on what you're cooking. So obviously if something is cured like bacon that already has salt in it, then you might need to, pull back on that and take that into account. Let me give you a real life example. Let's say you're seasoning a sauce and you add a little salt and you taste it. Tastes good. Add a tiny bit more. Taste it again. Does it taste better? Because if it does taste better, you need to keep asking yourself, how much more can I add before this just tastes salty?
Real fans know the real experts aren't on TV, they're in groups. these guys?
Major key alert. Just be sure to taste your food as you go. Now we can talk about spices. The world of spices is incredibly broad, and I suggest you play with them over time. And if you want to learn a little bit more about flavor combinations, you should look at the book Flavor Bible. It's incredible. So salt enhances flavor, spices change flavor. Now for the most important part, balancing flavor. That brings me to the 5 basic tastes. Sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. Most of the time you're gonna use a combination of 1, maybe 2, maybe 3. Some vegetables are naturally bitter. Some meats are naturally a little sweeter than others. Here's an example of a dish that is balanced with nearly all 5 tastes. And here's how I balance it. I've got a classic Tom Kha Gai soup here. Now, I want this soup to be sour. I want it to have a nice salty umami kick. I want some sweetness and I want some spice. So how do we get there? So the first thing I'm gonna do is when I make it, I'm gonna taste it and think about all 4 flavors. How they're all tasting. Maybe it's a little too tart, not salty enough, and missing some sweetness. Okay, now I know what to do. I'll add a little fish sauce for that salty kick, which will naturally add some umami, good stuff. I'll add some palm sugar for some sweetness, taste it again. Okay, now I got the sweetness I want. Now I need a little more acidity, so I'm gonna add a touch of lime juice. Taste it again. Okay, now it tastes good, but that lime juice now counterbalanced the salt. It needs a little bit more fish sauce, so pop a little more fish sauce. Taste it again. Okay, now it's got the salty umami, but I've lost some of the acid. Now we gotta add a little bit more lime juice. Taste it again. This is the act of flavor balancing. Sometimes it takes longer than you'd think. But what I will say is on that final taste, boom, there it is. It has all the levels where I want it to be. I'm happy and I'm confident to serve this. And listen, mastering flavor is great, but understanding texture is revolutionary. This is what separates someone who's good at cooking and someone who is absolutely mind-boggling excellent at cooking. Hence my cookbook, Texture Over Taste. This book will allow every cook, beginner, or an expert to unlock true culinary mastery. I wrote the book to get people to look at food a little bit differently. We always think about flavor, but we never ask the question about texture. What makes a great crunchy French fry? What makes the most perfect creamy mashed potato? It's texture, not just flavor. So if you ever want to get into that, click the link in the description. It's right there. It's also currently running a deal on Amazon. Now onto cooking techniques. Technique is the #1 thing that separates bad cooking from excellent cooking. Sautéing. Sautéing is a method of cooking that uses a relatively small amount of oil or fat in a shallow pan over relatively high heat. I would say like medium, sometimes medium high, but typically medium. But really the goal is to cook the thing in the pan, tossing occasionally until it's just cooked through. And if it gets a little color, that's totally fine. If you're trying to avoid that, you would then be going into a sweat, gently cooking, low heat with no color. #2, roasting. By definition, roasting is a cooking method that uses dry heat where hot air covers food, cooking it evenly on all sides from an open flame or an oven or some other heat source. To roast something properly, you want to look for some form of a dry heat. I prefer convection in an oven if you have it, just because it helps the air circulate around the food better. The whole goal is to dry the exterior in a way that you get a beautiful, nice browning on the exterior and perfectly cooked on the inside, whether that means that it needs to be brought to a medium rare, or if it's a vegetable, it's soft but not too soft. There are many roasting techniques and I urge you to try different ones of your own. #3, boiling and blanching. Boiling is the method of cooking food in, well, boiling water. It could also be stock until it's cooked to your desired consistency. Blanching is similar. Typically what happens is it goes in the boiling water and then as soon as it's done, it comes out and immediately is plunged into an ice water bath. Why? To stop the process of cooking and shock and refresh the item that it is you're cooking. What it'll do is retain color in vegetables and also keep the vegetables from overcooking. Make sure you take it out at the right time, and what you're really looking for is when it goes in that ice bath, there is enough ice that it doesn't melt. Something to look out for. #4, grilling. It's a form of cooking that involves heat applied to the surface of food. It usually involves a significant amount of direct radiant heat. Could be firewood, could be propane, etc. How do you know you're properly grilling something? Me personally, I like to grill aggressively. That means I'm looking for a lot of color. The best way to do it is have an offset setup. One side is really hot and one side is completely off. That way, whenever you're done getting nice grill marks and char on the food that you're cooking, if it's not cooked through, you can scoot it over to the cold side, close your lid, and let it continue until that is cooked through to your desired internal temperature. #5, braising. Braising is a combination cooking method that uses both wet and dry heats. Typically, the food is first browned at a high temperature, then simmered in a covered pot in cooking liquids such as wine, broth, coconut milk. The meat does not get fully submerged in the liquid. You're gonna want it 3/4 of the way up the meat. This also depends on the length of braising. If you're only braising for like maybe 1-2 hours, I'd say like halfway up should be enough. You can either cook it until the meat falls apart and it's super duper tender, but if it's a leaner meat or a very delicate meat like a fish, then you can just braise it till it's just cooked through. The second element is the liquid it cooked in. It has now become a beautifully flavorful broth. You can then turn that broth into a sauce, or you can just serve it straight up with that loose broth. That's nice. #6, searing. Searing is a technique in which the surface of the food, usually meat, is cooked at a very high temperature until until a browned crust forms, also called the Maillard reaction. Get a pan, set it over medium-high heat, add oil, just enough to coat the surface of the pan. Let it get extremely hot till nearly smoking, add in your protein, for example, this steak. Make sure it makes full contact with the pan, let it sear for 2 to 3 minutes, flip, and then another 2 to 3 minutes. This classic formula of medium-high heat, 2 to 3 minutes per side, has worked for every single piece of protein I have ever cooked in my entire life. Once the food is seared, if the inside is not cooked through, you can always lower the heat and then continuously flip until the food is cooked from the inside, or you can pop it in a low temperature oven at around 350 Fahrenheit until the internal doneness is achieved. Number 7, frying. I could simplify frying into one sentence, honestly. A high temperature cooking oil, around 350 Fahrenheit, you put food in there, you're frying. What I'm saying is you can fry anything like that, breaded or not. Vegetables like Brussels sprouts fry tremendously without breading. Now, if you want something extra crispy, then you would bread it. If you're breading it, you wanna make sure that it's evenly coated in the breading, there's no bald spots, and once it goes in the oil, you wanna see nice, even bubbling, not excessively violent, no crazy popping. And when it comes out, the inside should be cooked through and the outside should be a beautiful golden brown and crisp, not soggy. If you wanna learn more about how to fry anything, then you should watch our How to Fry Everything video. The link will be in the description for that. There are tons of other cooking techniques, but to me, these are some of the most important baseline ones that'll get you started and give you the ability to cook most general things. Things get more specific and advanced in technique after you master this level. Next up, sauces. What is a sauce? Sauces are liquids, creams, or semi-solid foods served on or used in preparing other foods. Most sauces are not normally consumed by themselves, but they add flavor and texture and visual appeal, so technically speaking, anything could be a sauce. But I'll give you a basic example. If you're American, think about ketchup. Do you just spoon ketchup in your mouth? No! You use it to dip things into, you use it on top of things. Now, back in the day, we would commonly identify the mother sauces. It's good to know your mother sauces, and you should research them. Can I remember all of them? Velouté, Espagnole, sauce de tomate, bechamel, and hollandaise. It's good to know them, but unless you worked in a traditional French restaurant, you're probably gonna end up using really any kind of a sauce that you can to make good flavor. But what we can learn from the French mother sauces is the principles of why sauce is important, how it should be utilized. And there's really two things that chefs often look for, but they're not the end all be all, and that is, number 1, adding a lot of flavor. If you're not gonna do that, you might as well just pour water on top of a steak and call it a day. Number 2, and this depends on the application, but generally a sauce should have some level of viscosity to it. Why? Because it needs to cling to the dish or the food that it is on, and you get that nice coating of the sauce. Some sauces are naturally thick, but more often than not, chefs are constantly trying to find a way to adapt sauces to their dish. If those are the things that chefs are looking for, what's their first step into making a sauce? Well, they look at the dish and they find ways to give their sauce shape and purpose. So here's a couple ways. There's thickening a sauce and there's emulsifying one. These are not the only ways. Emulsions. They help blend flavors together in a synchronous bite. Maybe you want a special color or have it coat your palate in a certain way. Emulsifying is the key. But emulsifications can be challenging. A broken sauce versus a smooth sauce is substantially different. A broken sauce is usually not gonna have the flavor nice and evenly distributed throughout the sauce, and also it won't cling to your food properly. An emulsified sauce, on the other hand, even distributed flavor clings to your food so that when you dip something or it's coated in a sauce, you pick it up and it's gonna carry that sauce with whatever vegetable, meat, carbohydrate into your mouth to then act as a vehicle for that flavor. Emulsions, good. Another way to look at that is thickening sauces. There's many ways to make a sauce thick. Fun fact, emulsifying also thickens a sauce, but you can also reduce, something like a red wine sauce for a standing rib roast. Reducing is literally boiling the sauce or simmering the sauce until you've evaporated the water out. So you've intensified flavor, you've thickened it, and sometimes it looks a little more desirable. You can add gelatin, you can blend in a hydrocolloid like xanthan gum. Science has made it so that any sauce can be whatever you want. Chefs and great cooks will find a way. But listen, anything can be a sauce. Hollandaise is a sauce. So is a mixture of sugar, fish sauce, lime juice. It's liquidy, but it's a sauce. And it might be good for a raw fish dish like a hamachi crudo, where it would soak into the fish rather than cling to it. So it's okay that it's liquidy. Make things flavorful, make them coat things well. Find a way to get it in people's mouths and make it taste good. Next up, cooking meat. There are really only 2 ways to cook meat: hot and fast or low and slow. Hot and fast is exactly what it sounds like. The goal is to achieve color on it on both sides, and hopefully by the time you flipped it over and gotten color on the other side, so in the case of a steak, that thing is cooked to the desired temperature, or maybe needs a few more minutes flipped back and forth, and then it's done. Now there's slow and low. The temperature is gonna be very low, and you're gonna cook that item very slowly. Because the temperature is lower, you're gonna avoid burning anything on the outside while very slowly cooking the internals of that product. What will happen with a protein is that if it's high fat, high intramuscular fiber, it'll get nice and tender and fall apart succulent. Cooking meat is about temperature and understanding the qualities of each cut and why they need to be treated differently to reach their full potential. These are the temperatures you need on most pieces of meat. Really, the goal with slow cooking is to cook something past well done slowly enough while you're preserving the juices, but to a high enough temperature that the gelatin and intramuscular fibers essentially melt. So for example, you can cook a chuck roast to 135 and get medium rare, but it's too chewy. So you really need the time and temperature where the intramuscular fibers are actually being melted properly, which is gonna be between 200 degrees and 205 degrees Fahrenheit. That'll be enough to be easily shredded with a fork. So first, figure out if you need to slow cook or not, identify your desired outcome, choose your method, braising, grilling, searing, etc., and pay attention to the thickness of your meat. If it's really thick, for example, a thick steak, you may need to use 2 methods of cooking to get the internal cooked before you get color on the outside. So for example, you might need to put it in an oven to cook the internal temperature closer to 130 or 135 and then sear it. If the meat is thicker than usual, you likely will only get color on the outside by searing it without cooking the inside. This is obviously considering a steak. Technically speaking, you'll hear a lot of things that certain meats need to be cooked a certain way, and that's the end of the story. And the simple reality is that's not exactly true. You can cook any piece of meat however the you want, assuming that it's safe to eat at that temperature. But each thing is gonna have a different outcome. It depends on if that outcome is desirable to you or not. So I'll give you 2 examples. A short rib. You can cook that protein hot and fast or low and slow and get completely different products, but you need to choose carefully how you do that. So if you were gonna low and slow cook a short rib, it's very simple. You would brown it, get some color on it if you wish. You can also not brown it. And let's say you decide to braise it low and slow. It'd be at a very low temperature, a very gentle simmer for a couple of hours. What will happen? It won't go dry because it has lots of fat and lots of gelatin and intramuscular fibers, which will then melt because you're going to take that internal temperature way past well done, and it can sustain that because it has enough fat in it, and it will become very tender and melty and fall apart, almost like shredded meat. It's so lovely. Now, if you wanted to cook it hot and fast, you could just grill it straight up, but because it's so chewy, in another culture like Korean culture, they would slice the short rib very thin, maybe even marinate it and grill it over really high heat. By slicing it thin, you make those intramuscular fibers much smaller, so they have a chance to melt much more quickly, which will happen on the grill. It won't be too chewy, and you can enjoy it like that. It benefits well from cooking well done. So my best suggestion is figure out the protein you want to make, learn everything you can about it, and cook it to your desired end product goal and research how to get there. There's a lot to learn here, and I'm not going to be able to explain it all in one video. So the best thing I can suggest is find a great recipe for cooking meat and follow that recipe to a T. Practice it over and over, learn about that technique, and then experiment from there, learn from there. You'll find that there's a million ways to cook one thing. The beauty of cooking meat is specifically that each cut and each type has its own character. And with proper care and proper technique, you'll know exactly how to bring out the best.
Between rent, student loans, and side hustles, that's exactly why I moved my money over to Cash App. I wanted to be more serious about setting up
in each. Lastly, we dive into the art of plating. It might sound a little weird or intimidating. Is it even worth the time? Small, thoughtful touches can make a big difference. We've all heard the saying, you eat with your eyes. But look, even if you're eating completely by yourself, just taking a couple extra 30 seconds just to make it look a little nice before you sit down to eat, to me makes a big, tremendous difference. You take care of the food. I do like to make my food look as beautiful as possible. If it looks good, it's definitely gonna make you feel good. Does an artist just explain how they do their art? No, they just do it. And you can only really get good at that by practicing it. So, think about adding garnishes on top of stuff, layering your food, adding lots of different colors. Those are a good place to start when it comes to plating and presentation. The other thing is composition, how you lay it on the plate. Are you gonna have it all be in one line? Do you want it to be like in a C shape around the edge of the plate? All these things are going to take time. They're going to take practice. This is a midway focus element. And by that I mean midway through your journey of learning how to cook, you can start to learn how to plate things nicely. But try to focus on technique first. So look, there's a lot of things we didn't cover. And I don't know that we could ever cover all of the world of cooking. They don't even cover all of the world of cooking in actual culinary school. Even if you spend years in culinary school, you will never learn everything about cooking. That is what cooking is supposed to be. It is a never-ending learning process. As long as you open yourself up, open your mind up, open your heart up to all the things that there is to learn, and just realize that you'll never learn it all, but it's the constant striving to learn it all that will make you good. We also didn't touch on baking. And let me put it to you like this. There's a reason in restaurants there's a separate pastry team, because when it comes to baking, desserts, it's a whole nother layer of knowledge and classifications that's exact and scientific. Whereas cooking can be a little bit more loose. But the number one surefire way to get good at anything cooking, baking, pastry is to do it over and over and over. If you want to get good, do the reps. Love you so much. Subscribe. Bye. Thank you again to Made In for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to check the link in the description to see their cookware and save on your order.